All right, Sirius XM 106, it is volume. Feedback, Nick Carter, Lori Majewski, and we've been saying Nick Valenci's coming in, but we have the bonus of Darian Zahidi as well.
Yeah.
Band fractions is what we specialize in here at a big fraction of CRX in the building. Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Thank you for having us.
It's a little early.
Like I said, dude, we always feel like we need to apologize because we know it's like dumb early for musicians.
But not for your get-ups. I mean, you totally look like rock stars. Look at the glitter. We got glitter on Nick.
Thanks. Haven't had a shower yet this morning, so I appreciate you.
That's
So
part of
right.
that's part of the rock star ethos.
Yeah.
Guys in bands can get away with that. Like I have to have 2 showers to make myself look human. You guys can just roll out of the bunk and just like keep it moving.
Well, but what's it like having musicians in here so early all the time? Are there mind lapses? Do people have to jog their brains
Lack
to start
of pretension.
working? That's a good thing.
There is a little bit of a
That is a
donut
good
glaze
thing.
in the eyes sometimes, especially if people come in to perform live and it's like, we're sorry. We're on 7 to 10. What can we do? So the second album, when did Brad join the band? Because
like a year ago.
that keyboard sound has really opened up like a completely different palette now.
Yeah, we're using a lot more synthesizers, and the second album has a different vibe from the first one. Much more collaborative vibe. We're all in this together now.
We wrote the record together. Nick and I and John, who's the bass player, we sort of started about a year and a half, 2 years ago after touring a lot, powwowing regularly every week and just like talking about influences, what we wanted the record to sound like. And then we started to get into the writing, and we sort of followed this collective vibe into a new direction.
Well, talking about what you wanted the record to sound like, New Wave Girl right here. Okay, I'm obsessed with this record. I love it.
Thank you, Lori.
So when you sit down, I mean, are you pulling out New Wave records? Are you talking about, that 80s electronic sound and then moderning it up, making it more modern?
What happened was we did the first record and we toured it a lot. And what happens on tour is you spend a lot of time together, killing time in a van, just driving, barreling through the country and listening to a lot of music and talking. So between, just sitting in the van, listening and talking about stuff, what do you like about this? What do you not like about that? It's kind of a creative think tank for like pre-writing, you know what I mean? So by the time we got off the road and got together to start writing, we kind of knew what we wanted to do because we, it's like if there's a Venn diagram of where all your influences intersect, we were trying to hit that.
And who was that? Like, what were you listening into the van, and who is the center of the Venn diagram of the four of you?
Well, to be honest, it was a lot of David Bowie and Iggy Pop and Talking Heads. Those were like kind of the 3 main ones, but it branched off into a lot of other things. For me, there's always some Tom Petty in there, so I bring that influence.
Same.
Some of the other guys in the band brought in more kind of 80s, like Oingo Boingo, things like that.
See, and that's funny because it's very L.A., Oingo Boingo is very L.A. And, Nick, you're from New York and you're so identified. I mean, the Strokes are as New York as like Iggy, as the Ramones or Lou Reed, right? When you guys are all, right, you're from L.A.
I'm from L.A. I met Nick in New York, though. I lived here for 10 years, so...
How does L.A. figure in? You mentioned Oingo Boingo. Does L.A. become, since that's the home of CRX, does that become another player in your sound?
I think so. It's tough to quantify how much the environment influences the art. So I don't know exactly, but...
I think it's the people, too. I mean, John, the bass player, is really big into Oingo Boingo, and I think he kind of brought that influence in. That was sort of his side of the Venn diagram, and he's, I don't know if it was an LA thing as much as like a music lover thing, being obsessed with. He's a drummer and a bass player, and so I think he loves really rhythmic, sort of more complicated groove stuff and progressive stuff. So he kind of brought that element into this music, I think.
It's amazing to me. I think more people appreciate Boingo now than when they were active. And I mean, you listen to some of the stuff. I mean, Danny Elfman, Only a Lad alone. It's like, where the you didn't hear stuff like that. It was so complex, and they played in weird time signatures and everything. Good stuff for sure.
But you also mentioned Elvis Costello in what I was reading about this. I just saw Elvis a few weeks ago at Bethel Woods here in New York, and plus early Cars. It really feels like you were going for a particular sound with this, and you said it's more electronic than the previous record.
Yeah, there's definitely more synthesizers, and it's a weird thing that happened when the first CRX record I made more in a vacuum and kind of by myself, wrote it by myself, and put this band together in the process of finishing that album and touring it. This second album, the band was together, and it became such a collaborative thing. And you would think that having more ideas in the room and more people putting their input would make the sound more varied or something, but the opposite happened, and we got more focused. And I don't know why or how, but the sound just got much more singular the more collaborative things became.
Sounds like they were having fun making it.
Yeah.
We had a
Hearing you talk
lot
about
of fun making this record. A lot of fun.
Well, I wanted to
Comes
ask
through.
you about that. When you started out solo, and I'd heard you say once that you kind of started doing it really out of a desire to just be able to do shows or do smaller shows because, your day job that Lori, made mention of, you get to the point where like you're in such a huge band, you're almost limited to where you have to play. You have to play bigger places.
Yeah, you have to play bigger places, and also just the machine gets so big, and things get less and less simple, I guess. And at that point I was craving just simplicity. Can I just set up with some friends and play wherever? And that was the idea behind the first record. It's become something kind of different now, though. It's not just a vehicle to get on stage in some club. It has legs for me creatively, and I mean, like I was saying, we had so much fun making the record that I'm kind of thinking, gosh, I just want to make another one right away.
Had you had much of a desire to sing? Because you kind of had to teach yourself to sing, yeah?
Yeah, no. I mean, I like singing. Don't get me wrong. I love melody, and I've always loved singing, but it was more this obstacle to being the front man of a band in a performance sense that I was not totally keen on that. I was always, as a kid, I identified more with the mysterious lead guitar player than with the, David Lee Roth guy right in front. But, I'm coming into it. I enjoy it. It's still a little awkward for me sometimes, but I enjoy it.
I mean, it seems like something that it would take you a little while just to get used to.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're not the front person in the band, you get to pick and choose the times when people pay closer attention to you. And when you're the front man, it's just on all the time. So it's a little bit more, emotionally demanding.
I got a tweet here from...
Sorry to look too into it.
No, that makes sense.
I got a tweet here from Threat of Joy saying, Nick Valencia was only 17 when the Strokes started. I need to lay down and reevaluate my life. I don't know if you're older. Are you about the same age?
We're pretty much the same
We
age.
are. Yeah, I think Darian's got 4 or 5 months on me or something.
Oh,
like
okay.
that, yeah.
So, I mean, as you get older as a musician, do you guys feel like you're just, there's a freedom and there's an enjoyment more that when things are going so fast, when you're on your way up and trying to prove yourself, that's probably why you're having more fun.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was fun then too. It was like a little easier because there was less complexity, and there was also a hell of a lot more drugs.
Just a bit.
So,
Perspective makes things more complicated too. When you don't have as much perspective, you just do, and when you do, when you get older and you have perspective, you sort of think about things a lot more and analyze things a lot more. So you have the benefit of perspective and of being able to look back on what's been done and being more strategic about your creativity and stuff, but then you also have this greater self-awareness, which, you know, it makes it a little more difficult. When you're 17, you don't give a, you know what I mean? You just do it.
Do you have kids as well, Darian?
I don't. No.
Okay. Because I have to imagine that that's part of it. You know, I know that you have 3 children.
I have 3 children, yeah.
One is a grown-up.
I got a stepdaughter and the 2 twins, yeah.
So, I mean, that plays into it. It's funny. I was thinking, because Meet Me in the Bathroom is one of my favorite books of the last few years. Lizzie Goodman's book, where it's about the 2000s music scene, specifically New York. I mean, the Rapture's in it, Moby's in it, but the centerpiece is the Strokes. And I have to wonder if, you know, CRX now, this second album coming really, you know, after that book, has that changed the way you even look at music? And
the book?
Yes, because that book, people can't stop talking about that. You just brought up the drugs, which is why I had to mention it.
One of my favorite
drugs.
books growing up was Please Kill Me. It's the oral history of punk rock.
It changed all our lives, I think,
Me too.
at a certain age.
Too.
Yeah.
And so this book, I mean, I don't know if people are looking at it this way. It's awkward for me because it's, you know, it's like the oral history of a time in my life. So I don't know how people are taking it. I read bits of it, and it's weird to read.
Was it really? Did she capture it well?
What well, it's heavily edited, right? But it is, you know, it's the words of the people who were there, and all she did was kind of interview people and edit it. So, you know, yeah, she definitely captured something. She captured something. I read the sections about LCD Sound System with a lot of interest because I love that band, and I did not know a lot about their backstory. So that was the most interesting part for me.
Okay. I just think it's so interesting that now CRX is coming out. I feel like there's a renewed interest. I mean, like...
Shit, I hope so.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, put it this way. You guys are quite young still for like a book like that to come out that makes you kind of reckon with your legacy at such a young age.
We're both 38 years old, by the way. So I don't know if that's super young in this...
38. This belt is older than that. 38.
But you know, you're usually 68 when you have to reckon with your legacy. And for a book to come out like that really captures a time. And then, I mean, so when I got the CRX album, I was like, no, I would be excited anyway because I love the Strokes and I loved your first record. But there was something about a relit fire. Thank you, Lizzie.
Yes, thank you, Lizzie, and thank you, Lori. And you're right. It really means a lot to be a part of something that people look at with such reverence, and to even float this word around, like you're saying, legacy is. I mean, it's an honor, and it's unbelievable. What can I say? I'm a lucky man.
I want to know what the writing process for the new record was like, because you said it was very collaborative, everybody. But I mean, you know, the first record, you kind of had to teach yourself how to write lyrics, yeah?
Yeah, the lyrics are a tricky one. Music is really fun. Lyrics are a little bit less fun. Darian and I write a lot of lyrics together, actually, which is, you would think, is an awkward thing to do. Oh shit, sorry. With your friend, hey, come over to my house and let's write some lyrics together. Very weird concept.
Let's talk about poetry and drink tea.
But yeah, we
did.
You know, we kind of.
But some people do that. Some people literally like carve out time to go and. I mean, you know,
we do.
It's a different process.
Yeah, we do. It's
a lot of time.
Not that it's a job or whatever, but it is pretty deliberate where we schedule things in and meet at my place or sometimes at his place and just kind of get it going. And we brought in, you know, I brought in songs in unfinished state. So did Darian. John, the bass player, was also bringing songs in, and we would just kind of work on them together. You know, I want to talk about the songwriting process in a way that is interesting, but the truth is a lot of the time it's boring.
That being said, I think what we find boring is still interesting. For instance, like the idea of if I bring in a demo and in my head it's like, oh, I wrote this song. And then I show it to Nick, and he's like, this is really cool, but this one thing, it's not that cool. This bridge, it's it's actually not that great. And you go, okay, I respect you, and I know we like the same stuff, so I got to roll with that. And then he'll go, what about this? And so you bring in like this baby, and then somebody
hates your baby.
Somebody loves your baby, but they make your baby so much better than you thought it could be. And then all of a sudden you have this new thing that, it's like making a child. It takes both parties and both genetics to come together to make this thing that, neither of you could have made by yourself.
Well, I guess what I mean is the album has a distinct vibe, as I mentioned, I think Brad being part of it really absolutely sort of expanded things. I mean, the first record was great, but, the album has a definite vibe. So I'm saying, were you going sort of song for song, or did you have this vibe in mind, or did it just sort of develop as you were writing?
The vibe was definitely, we had a vibe we wanted, and we tried to keep things, when we were writing, we would say, is this on brand, sorry for the expression, but is this on the vibe that we sort of decided we wanted to try and achieve? Does this part, is that? Could we make it more that? You know what I mean?
No, I respect that, because a lot of people would just say, oh, no, everything was organic. It's like, no, I mean, if you kind of have a vibe or a feel or an idea, if you write things and if it doesn't if it falls short of that, it might just get tossed. I respect that. I respect that honesty.
There were a couple of albums that we knew were benchmarks for vibe that we were going for. Iggy Pop, The Idiot was a big one. David Bowie, Scary Monsters.
I hear that.
And
Fear of Music.
Talking Heads, Fear of Music, also Remain in Light, both of those albums. So, and the first song that we wrote for the album, it's the last track on the album, it's called Love Me Again. And when we recorded that song, it's the first one we wrote and recorded, and we, it felt to me like we really tapped into the vibe that we were going for. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of held as like the benchmark for all the other ones of, or do they fit with that vibe, because that song fits what we want.
Got it. We're checking it out right now. You can't tell because you don't have. Oh, you do have headphones on.
I hear it.
Yeah.
It's sexy.
It is sexy.
I feel sexy. I like it.
For your touch and your kiss, but you keep me waiting. I can feel you changing. Love me again.
One of my favorite songs on the record.
Matt, can you tell why I like this record?
Oh my God, it's totally.
Is this a Lori record?
Oh my God! Before the vocals even kick in, you could tell why you love it. But
Thank you.
I don't know. The song has a sense of mystery to it to me. It has like a mysterious feel to me for some reason too, which maybe adds to its allure or sexiness.
Well, Matt, we're very serious musicians.
Well, by the way,
I'll have you know.
I am a very serious broadcaster as well, so I understand.
Almost a little Peter Murphy dust sprinkled on that too.
For sure.
But Iggy Pop's coming up to Sirius next week, and I'm going to have him on my other show on First Wave. I am going to play this song on that show when he comes up so he can hear it.
Amazing.
Because it definitely has vibes, but it's not trying to be him. It just has vibes. And when we talk a lot about artists who, nowadays, a lot of artists like have to, if something sounds like it in the wake of the blurred lines thing, right? Pharrell and what's his name?
Robin Thicke.
Robin Thicke got into trouble just because they came in with the vibe. I love when you're in a car together as a band and you're driving along and you're listening to music that inspired you. You're not going in and saying, all right, well, let's change it. And it's not going to be the idiot. It's going to be the dope. And we're going, that's not what you're doing. It's
this is our new single. This is our new single, The Imbecile.
And when I first heard the record, I didn't know yet what your inspirations for it were. I listened cold. And I loved it. And then after I read about it, I went, I hear that. And I think that's, to use the word organic again, why it appealed to me. But it wasn't like I right away went, oh, I see what they're doing. First, I liked the record, which is a cool thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Lori. Thank you so much. You're so complimentary. And yeah, it's not like we are listening to Talking Heads and just plagiarizing, that's not...
I think sometimes you can't, even if you want to.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wouldn't know how to do that, really.
It's people. I think a lot of music, cool stuff comes about by you trying to replicate something and you just can't do it the way they did it. It's the way you do it, and it's a whole new thing. And there's that vibe there, and there's that influence. But you sort of it's how evolution takes place in music.
And I also think if you're of a certain age and you come out of, for want of a better term, a certain scene or a certain sort of like genre, that's part of the foundation. So it's sort of in the ether anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's like, so I would never say, yeah, these guys obviously like sat down, listened to Remain in Light, Scary Monsters, and said, let's go do that. But I mean, it's clearly part of what's made you who you are musically.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how else to do this. You know what I mean? I'm influenced by things, and then you just kind of, as a creative person, you just create what you create, and the influences are there. When we were making the first Strokes album, like fucking decades ago, it was a similar thing where we all loved the Velvet Underground. We all loved Lou Reed. There was this kind of New York thing that we all felt really strong about. And we were like, how come nobody sounds like that nowadays? How come there are no bands like this? And it was a fairly conscious decision on our part to be like, no one's doing this, so we're going to do this because everybody loves this kind of music, yet nobody plays it anymore.
Right.
In a way, that's kind of what we've tapped into with CRX.
Did you get the significance of that at the time? Because the funny thing, like, you've known Julian since you were like, what, 14? And of course you become huge. And I can only imagine, to some degree, it's almost like kind of surreal. It's like, I've just known this dude forever. I've been fucking around with my friends. And then, bam, you become like the most important rock band of a generation, et cetera, et cetera.
Surreal is the right word, yeah. It's insane.
But you also made what I always say is a perfect record. Like, I always felt like that first Strokes record is a rare example of a perfect record. And, I knew that his name was going to come up at some point, but in talking to John Taylor, who you know very well.
Yeah, I do.
Yes?
He's a dear friend of mine, actually. You wouldn't think so. He's my wife's ex-husband.
Exactly.
But we are a very close post-nuclear family.
Yes, and he loves you very much. I know that.
John Taylor, the bass player of Duran Duran,
right?
We should
Not
say.
your John, bass player. Because
no,
every
John
time you keep saying John, your bass player, I'm like, all right.
Okay, John Safley, CRX bass player. John Taylor, Duran Duran bass player.
Well, one of the things we talk about is when a band has a quote unquote perfect first album, which he so humbly, but I believe he's right, talked about when he talked about Duran's first record. He says the problem is the press have nothing to do with it. If it takes you 3 or 4 records to get where you're going as a band, then the press, can hail you as theirs. There's a story. Yeah. And so I think the Strokes fans right away knew this is a great record, beginning to end. I think, and there was a lot of press that got behind it too, but the people who didn't, that's because they had nothing. They couldn't take the ride and say, I saw them develop.
But there was also, Lori, so many people got behind it and the press got behind it that inevitably there had to be people who were like, fuck this sucks. You got to have haters.
Their pants are too tight.
Yeah, our pants were tight.
Listen, hey, you helped usher in skinny jeans, and I thank you for that. It was nice. Let me just reintroduce you real fast. It's Darian and, of course, Nick from CRX. Question, so when you were looking to do the second record, you knew it was going to be different just by virtue of what you had in mind, vibe-wise, what you had in mind, and sort of changes in the band. How did you go about choosing a producer? Because, of course, Josh Homme did the first record, almost sort of accidentally, it seemed. Because it seemed like, he was just like your homie and you're like, hey, listen to some of this stuff. What do you think? And he ends up producing the record.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened on the first one. I just was like, hey, I got some demos. What do you think? And then he came in to produce and ended up being kind of the closest collaborator on that record. And on this one, it was really different in that the band was all put together and the collaboration was happening before we were even in the studio. And we, to be honest, lucked out. We spoke to a couple of different producers and then met this guy, Shane Stoneback, who had just moved from New York to L.A. He's a pretty renowned producer, actually. He's worked with Vampire Weekend, Sleigh Bells, a lot of indie bands. He's made awesome sounding records before. And we met him and really liked him and just kind of took a leap of faith with him.
I was going to say, was it a comfort level or was it that he absolutely got what you wanted to do more than other folks?
He really got it. He really got it. And he really helped. You know, he understood when we were talking about the sounds we wanted and we played him the songs. He's like, I get this and I love this music and I love the influences and I love the songwriting that you guys are going for. And he was almost like, you know, it sounds cliche, but like a sixth member of the band, you know, and he was a sounding board for ideas. And if something wasn't working, he was sort of like a tiebreaker. But he was also an amazing engineer and he could make these sounds we were going for actually happen. And he knew how to make these things happen and the gear to use. And
how to get good performances out of people too.
Yeah.
You know, how to like just calm you down, whether you're the singer or the drummer or doing a guitar solo or whatever, just how to get the best out
See,
of
that's
each
funny
band
because
member.
you've both been in bands, and of course you know your way around the studio. I always wonder what a producer's role is with somebody who, you know, as we just said, you're young, but you're kind of a veteran, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's always different. You know, that producer role it can be so many different things in music. But yeah, with this guy Shane, it was really for him about, you know, he helped us with pre-production. He'd come in and help us with arrangements. You know, maybe this one's a little too fast, this one's a little too slow. Do you need to do that double chorus at the end? That, and also keeping us on track. You know, sometimes in the studio, experimentation can get the best of you sometimes, and you can go down paths that you may not be necessary. And he helped us stay focused, and that's a big part of the sound of the album being so singular and focused, and having this sound is him, because when we got away from that, he pulled us right back in. You know, kind of like, guys, remember what we're going for, and this is not what we're going. So he was that guy, you know.
Yeah,
he actually, I mean, I hats off to him. He deserves a lot of credit. I think I've worked with a lot of people before, and he produced the shit out of this record.
And that's a lot of trust, as you just said, you know, to be able to say,
Yeah.
listen, you know what, this is not it, and go, okay.
Oh yeah, I trust him a lot. And this is not a big budget record, you know. This is not like a major label 6-figure. Like we made this shit on our own. It's just us and Shane, and he went above and beyond.
So now you guys are about to take this on the road tonight. You're playing at the Mercury Lounge. I know on the 13th you're playing at the Echo in LA. Darian, what do you think of we talked a lot about in the studio. Now how do you bring this live?
It's interesting because we wrote this record and before we went and recorded it, we knew we wanted to do at least a chunk of it live. We wanted to do takes, old school style, which we did in the studio. We set up, we got takes, you know, Shane was like, yeah, take 5, that's the one, come in and listen to that. So we did pre-production where we sat and played the songs live and we sang them, and we had a pretty good idea of what this was going to sound like live before we made the record. It's that kind of record. It wasn't like pieced together, you know. At the core, you're hearing a band in the studio getting live takes. That being said, when it came time to start rehearsing it, it was like, you know, we had never. You add stuff in the studio, you write stuff in the studio, you come up with harmonies, you come up with new synth parts. So it was, even though we had written it to be a live record, it was like, wow, this is like a workout, you know.
It changes a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes in the studio, you know, you're using, maybe it's a synthesizer part, but you know, you stack it. You have to record like 3 or 4 of those synthesizers and make it sound really big and lush. And then when you're playing live, you know, how do you make it sound big and lush? You know, you kind of can't. And it's a live set. It's different. You know what I mean?
But you guys feel like you have a real chemistry together on stage.
Yeah.
Because it's a different
feels
animal
really
being
good.
in the studio.
Yeah, and like Darian was saying, the songs that are on the record are live takes. It's just a band in a room, and you know, we added to it and overdubbed things and kind of ornamented it.
And if people don't know, that is kind of rare today. I mean, you know,
that's
with
super rare today.
With Pro Tools, it's so easy just to punch in and
it's
fix
not
stuff.
even just with
Right.
Pro Tools, Nick. It's that getting into a studio. Studios are expensive. Setting up a band in a studio costs a lot of money, and
Which is the crazy
not
thing.
to
because
mention
you
that
can
bands
record
aren't
so
even
cheaply
good
at home now. You
People
know?
don't even know how to play anymore because everybody's used to just editing themselves in Pro Tools and chopping up their performances. So to get a band who can go into a room and actually play a song from start to finish in a really tight way is becoming more and more rare.
I say to bands all the time, like, you know, people, especially when they do like ultra heavy stuff, or they'll like make these elaborate records in the studio, and I go, you guys realize you got to fucking reproduce this live at some point, you know? And oh, that's right.
I do think about that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do is to just watch YouTube old performances of these records that we're talking about. Watching Talking Heads Stop Making Sense is one of my favorite
Amazing
concert movies to watch. And I know all the songs so well.
They got a lot of ringers in there, though. They got a lot of like Bernie Worrell's in the band, and and he's a beast.
The band is amazing.
Yeah.
But that's what I love about it. I love watching them recreate the songs that they made in the studio, and they don't sound exactly the same, but they sound awesome.
And it's still pretty minimal, even though they did bring in a couple guys to fill it out. It's still pretty. There's not a huge amount of things going on there. There's no tracks. So many bands play with tracks. We made a point of, are we going to be able to do this live without tracks, without, having Ableton running or whatever? Like we want everything to be played on stage. And I mean, that stopped making sense. It's like, it's just guys on stage and a woman.
I'm impressed
playing,
that you mentioned Bernie Worrell, man. He's
Bernie,
such a great player.
Rest in power. He just came up with the most insane sounds that people talk about Bootsy when I think he really was Parliament Funkadelic. I really do.
Yeah. He played with a lot of people. I think he did stuff with...
He played with the Pretenders.
Did he? I didn't even know that. I know he did stuff with Grace Jones for a long time.
Grace.
Yeah.
He's on My Baby on the Pretenders on that Get Close album, which I'm sure like at that point he probably just could have like almost phoned it in because...
The Pretenders have an album called Get Close?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
We have a song called Get Close.
Yeah, there's a song on our record called Get Close. Interesting.
CRX, the album is Peak. And before you guys go, I have to say, so the Strokes have only had a few choice big party gigs this year, right? Going out with the Barclays Center for New Year's Eve.
I hope you're coming.
Jesus.
We are going to party. It's going to be
like
a proper New Year's Eve
1979?
party.
Like it's 2002.
Thank you, Darian.
I'm looking forward to your
Skinny
giant
jeans
David Byrne
required.
suit too. That would be nice. All right, Darian
Seriously,
and
excited for that.
Thank you very much.
I mean,
Me too.
if that's not going to be the place to be in Brooklyn, that in New York City that night, Alex, you're going to move back for that? He's moving to L.A. from Brooklyn. Oh, sorry.
Way to ruin
Hopefully
it, Lori.
soon.
Oh, she spilled.
Well, he
the
wants
beans.
to.
Spoiler alert.
Someday.
We'll be happy to have you in LA, Alex.
Everybody does it eventually.
Yeah. All right, so CRX, the album is Peak, P-E-E-K. You made a really great record.
Thank you,
seriously.
Nick.
Thank you so
Lori.
much.
Thanks so much for having
And
us.
go out and see these
Thanks
guys
for getting
live.
up early with us.
It was our pleasure.
Sorry.
We'll be right back on Feedback.
Bye.